Imagine you get the chance of doing that one thing in your life and present that in front of hundreds of people. What is the one thing you would like to talk about? Now, for some of you, that one thing might come quite clearly. For others, like me, we don't know where to start. I found myself in many situations in life where I searched for that one thing. You could also call that a phenomenon of our privileged Generation Z, or as Gesa Neitzel calls it in one of her books, if you can be anything, who do you want to be? So maybe you can relate to that. There are many searches for one things. When you try to pursue a university degree, or you want to pursue a career to become a doctor, a lawyer, or an artist, you want to find that one idea to base a startup upon, or you want to find that one partner. Whatever it is for you, today I will share my journey, how I approached in finding my one things. So, when I started out my career, I wanted to become either rich, famous, or powerful, because that was the definition I had, what it needed to be successful. So I began as a project manager in a big corporation. And there I came across Agile project management. Maybe some of you heard of that. So in classical project management, you have a fixed time and fixed resources and also a fixed goal. And that is really helpful if you have all the information together and you want to align these three things around pursuing that goal. In Agile project management, you have a fixed time too. You also have fixed resources, but you leave the goal open. Now, Agile project management became more and more popular when there needed to be a way to cope with all of the uncertainty and simply being open to finding a better solution. So think about some projects in your life. Do you approach them agile or rigid or classic? The answer is it depends, because it does depend on the information that you have. And there are many projects that you should approach in a classical way. What is the biggest project you will ever have? It's your life, basically. And here I urge you to think about if you want to approach that in a more classical way or in an agile way, helping you iterate along the way as you learn. So a few years down my career, I made a critical mistake. I thought that in order to be good at my job, I have to give it everything I have. I need to be 100% focused. And I was. I became successful in my definition of either being powerful, rich, and famous quite fast. What I also noticed is that I really have other needs coming up more and more. So the more I was into my rigid working structure and the more successful I became, the more I wanted to be adventurous, creative, simple in nature. And the more these things came up, the more I pushed them down. And this is the phenomenon we see a lot today with overworking, or as Brené Brown calls it, numbing. And you see that in a lot of health numbers in today's statistics. So luckily, I noticed that, and I stepped out for an initial vacation and then stepped out of my known-to-be successful career and went to work for 8 months on a sailing boat and went around the world. What I learned here is that there is never really one thing, that it's always at least two things or opposite sides. Because as I went on this trip, I was thinking about how cool it would be to work again. And isn't that interesting? Mark Manson calls that in his book, The Secret Art of Not Giving a F. What are you willing to struggle for? So every one thing has at least two sides or many sides. And the more we realize that and the more we embrace these different sides, the more magic can unfold. So maybe you can relate to that the more and more you live your structured day-to-day life, you maybe do have the urge to become creative in some parts. Or the more and more analytical you are in certain ways, following a really clear structure, the more adventurous you might want to be in others. On this sailing trip, I learned one other important thing. So imagine being out on the water for several weeks, crossing the Atlantic with just the wind, the waves, and the ocean. I learned the importance of solitude and really being in silence. All the white space that we have today is usually filled up with our devices. So if we have 2 seconds where we're waiting, our hand magically moves into our pocket and then we end up on our grandma's friend's Instagram profile and we don't even know how we got there. Did you know that 67% of men and 25% of women would rather get electric shocks than be left alone with their thoughts? That was a Harvard study, by the way. Isn't that crazy? Now, science says it's not really a part of our willpower. And of course, these devices make us attached in some ways, but it's because we simply unlearned taking silence and taking moments for ourselves. And here I was on that boat with really nothing to do. We didn't have Skylink, or maybe it would have been available, but we didn't use it. And what I found instead, next to silence, was gratefulness. And also, if you're really in a present moment, it gives you the ability to stretch time. When I came back home from this trip, I wanted to cultivate that part more and more. I wanted to understand what effects it has. And I came across how not only the mind is essential in understanding how it functions and that we cultivate solitude as an integral part of our growth, I also learned that can look different for everyone. So there doesn't have to be that one certain type of meditation. It really is a muscle that we can train and we have to learn again in whatever way that is suitable. What I also wanted to understand more is how our body plays into that. And when making a decision or thinking about certain things, who tells us what is actually good and bad for us? If we ask our logic, then the logic asks itself. So we need another important element, and that is our body. And our body is a brilliant perceptual surface if we step into that with solitude. And we all know that we need to take care of our bodies, and we also know that we need to do that in a healthy way, also with movement, because we need good movement in order to detoxify not only our brain, but also for our whole system to function as that perceptual surface. So think about a moment in your life when you did not listen to your body or gut or instinct or whatever you want to call it, and you probably took a controllable route, something you did not really want to do. Because what happens is, and that is how our brain was built up, is that it filters 10,000s of information for us the entire day, and it puts it in buckets, good or bad, and good or bad, or good or bad. And it helps us basically survive and go through the day with all the input that we're getting. It also does that for things based on our background, that it rather decides things that are controllable, because we do not want to experience a rejection. Because a rejection could mean we could be excluded in former times from our tribe, and that could have cost us maybe our survival. if we don't take the step to listen to our body and use that perceptual surface, we might miss out on the bigger opportunities that come when actually listening and embracing more the unknown path that I talked in the beginning about with Agile project management. What I learned is that there isn't actually one thing. What I learned instead is that there are many things. And if we integrate these many things into our life, really magic can happen. And what can help us with that is using the power of silence, using our body, and integrating that. So I encourage you to go and look for the many, the stuff that sparks you joy. Maybe also look for the opposites. Because this is the stuff where really interesting things can happen when we learn to integrate them. Of course, if you want that towards a more fulfilling and happy life. Thank you.